1976 Soweto uprising, it is essential to grasp the historical context of apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination enforced by the South African government in South Africa by the National Party in 1948 and remained in place until the early 1990s. The roots of apartheid can be traced back to the colonial era and the policies of white minority rule that were established in South Africa. South Africa was colonized by European powers in the 17th century, primarily by the Dutch and later by the British. The establishment of colonial rule brought with it the subjugation and marginalization of the indigenous African populations. The colonial powers implemented policies that reinforced racial divisions and the idea of white superiority. In 1913, the South African government enacted the Natives Land Act, which effectively reversed most of the land for white ownership. This legislation severely restricted the access of Black Africans to land, leading to forced removals, dispossession, and the concentration of Black populations in designated areas known as reserves or homelands. During the early 20th century, Afrikaner nationalism, a political ideology espoused by the white Afrikaans-speaking population, gained momentum. Afrikaner nationalists sought to protect and promote the interests of Afrikaners who were descendants of the Dutch settlers. They believed in the preservation of Afrikaner culture, language, and economic dominance. The National Party came to power in 1948 under the leadership of Dr. Daniel Malan, and they began implementing apartheid as an official policy. The term apartheid itself means apartness or separateness in Afrikaans, reflecting the essence of the system. Apartheid was a comprehensive system that aimed to enforce racial segregation in all aspects of life and institutionalize white minority rule. The government classified South Africans into different racial groups, primarily as white, black, colored or mixed race, or Indian. This classification determined an individual's legal status and rights, including where they could live, work, and study. The Group Areas Act of 1950 segregated residential areas based on race, forcibly removing non-white populations from designated white areas. This led to the establishment of racially segregated townships and the forced removal of millions of Black Africans from urban areas. Past laws required non-white individuals to carry identification documents, passbooks, that restricted their movements and controlled their access to employment and services. Forced removals were carried out to clear areas designated for white settlement. Under apartheid, public amenities such as parks, beaches, hospitals, and transportation were segregated, with separate facilities for different racial groups. Black Africans were subjected to inferior services and infrastructure. Laws were enacted to prohibit interracial marriages and sexual relationships, further enforcing racial divisions and promoting social and cultural separation. The Bantu Education Act of 1953 established a separate and inferior education system for Black Africans, aimed at preparing them for a life of manual labor and limiting their access to quality education and opportunities. The Bantu Education Act had significant and lasting consequences for Black African students and the broader South African society. The Act entrenched educational inequality, depriving Black African students of access to quality education, advanced subjects, and opportunities for intellectual and personal growth. It limited their prospects for higher education, professional careers, and socio-economic advancement. The inferior education provided under the Act perpetuated socio-economic disparities between different racial groups in South Africa. It reinforced the cycle of poverty, limited job prospects, and hindered social mobility for Black African communities. Despite the oppressive system imposed by the Act, Black African students, parents, and communities resisted and found ways to maintain their educational aspirations. Many established informal schools, organized community-based educational initiatives, and fostered a culture of learning and knowledge sharing. The Act contributed to the development of political consciousness among Black African students and fueled their involvement in anti-apartheid activism. Educational institutions became sites of resistance and spaces for organizing and mobilizing against the apartheid regime. Ultimately, the Bantu Education Act of 1953 reinforced racial segregation and perpetuated educational inequality in South Africa. It aimed to keep alive the ideology and practices of apartheid, limiting the opportunities and prospects of Black African students. The legacy of this act continues to be felt in South Africa, even after its repeal in 1979, as the country grapples with the consequences of the discriminatory education system. Test against the compulsory use of Afrikaans as a language of instruction. The march was organized by the South African Students' Movement and other student organizations. As the students marched through the streets, the police responded with force, using tear gas, batons, and firearms to disperse the crowd. The protesters, armed with stones and homemade weapons, fought back against the police. The clashes between the students and the police resulted in widespread violence, injuries, and loss of life. The events of the Soweto uprising quickly gained international attention and condemnation. Journalists and photographers captured the brutal crackdown on the students, and the images and reports spread around the world. This brought increased scrutiny and pressure on the apartheid government. Following the initial uprising, protests and demonstrations spread to other townships and cities across South Africa. The uprising inspired a wave of resistance against apartheid, with workers, activists, and organizations joining the cause. The anti-apartheid movement gained momentum and united diverse groups in the struggle for freedom and equality. Of his lifeless body being carried by a fellow student, Mbuyisa Makubo, while Peter's sister, Antoniette Sitole, ran beside them, became an iconic image that captured the horror and brutality of the apartheid regime.
Now stop! Stop right there! This is an illegal gathering. I'm giving you 3 minutes to disperse. Go home! Go home! Will you